Been spending most our lives living in a gangster's paradise. Been spending most our lives living in a gangster's paradise. Keep spending most our lives living in a gangster's paradise. Keep spending most our lives living in a gangster's paradise.
3, 2, 1, roll 5.
In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Good evening, friends, and welcome to the second episode of Crime and Punishment. This is a legal podcast, not a political podcast. Like all of you good listeners out there, I too love Big Brother now. There will be no politics on this show, only legal analysis. We will only discuss legal news. We will absolutely not talk about politics, so please don't ban us from YouTube. This is the podcast for the Invictus Law Firm, PA, a criminal defense law firm in Orlando, Florida. If you heard the program last week, I was not joking. I was kind of joking, but I was not joking about we need a social media intern. Because I just don't have the time or the Asperger's enough to post this link to all of the different social media outlets as we're going live. So if you're looking to be a law firm intern, which basically means you're free labor, please do get at us. Before we go into the public service announcements tonight, I want to introduce a young man who has been a law student with us for a long time. Well, I mean, maximum's 3 years, right? He's been a law student with us for a while. He is now an attorney in his own right. That's how long I was in jail. So, please give a warm welcome to Mr. Tiger Jin. How's it going, Tiger?
Yo.
Epic introduction. So, Tiger's here to talk with me tonight about the legal news. We are not talking about politics. But first, I wanted to go through some public service announcements. First public service announcement of 3 is for the lawyers and the law students out there. And that is these people that you read about, whether you're in law school or whether you're in whether you're in law practice or you're in law school, you read appellate opinions, right? And you read Supreme Court opinions. And the public service announcement here is that these are real people. These are not just some name in a textbook. And this is something I found out in a very real way this past week. When I had to track down somebody in an appellate opinion, I had to track down the appellate lawyer and then the case docket and then the trial lawyer because of the case that we were researching. It was so 100% on point with the case that we are doing that I absolutely had to talk to the original lawyer on that case to get the paperwork. So that case, I can't talk about the facts of it or what happened, but trust me when I say it was heart-wrenching. And the fact that this guy is here in Florida and that I have spoken with his attorney who knows him very well, it's kind of surreal, because from day one in law school, you read these appellate opinions, and it's just, Mrs. So-and-so had this dress for sale, and Mr. So-and-so at this company violated the contract, and so they went to court, But when you get into a case that actually means something and that has real life consequences, and not only that, but it's contemporary, and these people are alive, and they are very much in your neighborhood, it becomes a very real thing. And the reason I made that, the reason
what I wanted to put in was that a lot of appellate opinions, they omit a lot of facts and often will stay on the one-sided, are often one-sided in their discussion too.
Yeah, and that's for a reason. The appellate courts, they limit the facts because they only want to talk about the facts that are relevant to, what's going on in their opinion. But there's a whole life behind this, right? Like there's not just the lady with her dresses. There's the lady who, was from San Francisco and her husband died and, she had children. Like these things don't make it into the appellate opinions. The human side of it does not factor in. Which is also a good thing, in a sense, in that appellate opinions should not be deciding on sentimental things. They should be deciding on the law. But a lot of times they don't do either. So, but the reason I bring it up is because before the inaugural episode, a friend of mine, also a lawyer, he's also the one who suggested the outro track, the metal version of Gangster's Paradise. We were in college together, or rather we were friends while we were both in college, and then we were friends while we were both in law school, even though we went to different colleges and different law schools. But we're both lawyers now, and he was saying, if you have attorneys listening to your podcast, you might accidentally make them into better attorneys, especially given your experiences. And I was saying, if I made anyone a better attorney, it would be worth doing the podcast. If one attorney listened to this show and said, you know what, we've been a bunch of a-holes this whole time. We really should be taking a different approach to law. That would be worth doing the show, that alone. So that is the first public service announcement. The second public service announcement, I want to read some statistics from the SPCPM, what is that? St. Peter Claver Prison Ministry, right? And of course, I lost the internet tab. Of course, here it is. All right. So in Florida alone, the state of Florida houses the third most prisoners in the United States and spends $31,500 on each prisoner per year. About 1/3 of Florida prisoners are back in jail after 1 year. That means you get out of jail, after a year, you are back in jail. 1/3 of people, 43% are back within 3 years. Osceola County, which is just south of Orange County, where I'm from, Osceola County is where Disney World is, right? They tracked 37 homeless men who were arrested 1,250 times over a 10-year period and spent 61,896 days in jail. The total cost of that was $6.4 million for these 37 homeless people. Like the exorbitant cost of the prison system. I want to do an episode just on the prison system one day, but that cost, not just in money, but in human lives, is so extraordinary that you would not be able to wrap your head around it. I still can't wrap my head around it, and I've been doing this for over a decade. And it's amazing to me. The third most prisoners in the United States here in Florida. And that's also amazing because the United States has the highest incarceration rate in the entire world. 5% of our population, last time I checked, was in prison. Highest incarceration in the world. Freest country in the world, too, by the way. Third public service announcement. Do not speak to the cops. Seriously, I think, I don't know how many times I've said this in my life since I've been a lawyer. Don't talk to the cops. Like, this is American Citizenship 101. Do not talk to the police, ever. Don't do it. Don't do it. You think you're helping yourself? You're not helping yourself. You think the cops care about what happened? They don't care about what happened. The cops are not there to investigate. I promise you, I know this not just as a lawyer, I know it personally. I know it from firsthand experience. They do not care about the investigation. They care about making the arrest. Anything you say to the police, they are using against you. They're not using it to find out what happened. They don't care what happened. They think they already know what happened because cops are so smart. They don't care what you have to say except that is going to hem you up. Don't talk to the cops. There are plenty of videos. I'll probably play one of those videos sooner or later on this program. But in the meantime, don't talk to them. Let your lawyer talk to them. You might get arrested. You might spend a day in jail before you get bonded out. But don't talk to them. Because eventually you'll prove that you're innocent. And you'll prove that the cops are retarded. Just don't do it. All right? Now, getting into the legal news.
Well, before you do that, just real quick, 2 good sources about not talking to the police, because I know that can be very, very confusing to people because, the cops, they ask me, what about if they ask my name and things, what should I say? On YouTube, real easy, there's a good seminar video on it, literally titled, Don't Talk to the Police. And then another resource is a small book that I found called When the Cops Come Knocking. And it's partly comic book style. It breaks down everything real Barney style, what to do when you encounter the police. So those are 2 good resources. Don't Talk to the Police on YouTube and When the Cops Come Knocking.
You don't happen to have those links, do you? I'm sure it's a good, easy search.
The YouTube one is easy to find. The book, I might have to dig around.
All right, we might have to play that one later on. Not this week, but next time around. Oh, right, the news. All right, so Tiger and I were supposed to be talking about legal news, right? So, I went and started doing research, show prep. That's what you do in show business. Radio programs, TV programs, podcasts, you prepare for the show, right? So you go and look up these things and you outline what you're going to talk about. Well, I went looking for legal news. I went looking for criminal defense news, and what was absolutely astounding to me is that I couldn't find anything that was not political. Forgive the double negative, but absolutely nothing out there about crime going on in this country is depoliticized. Like, you go to the trusted news sources, of course, like, CNN, NPR. You find a whole wall about crime and justice. What Kyle Rittenhouse's fate reveals about law and order. Former Capitol Police Chief's letter to Congress on delays and failures leading up to Capitol riot. Everything is politicized. Female Nazi concentration camp secretary charged with complicity in 10,000 murders in Germany. We're definitely not talking about that one. Where to even begin? The police shooting, I guess the commentary is that any choice of story is itself a decision and a political decision. And your choice to put forward that story on your website is in itself political. So really anything we talk about on this program, we're going to be accused of putting forth a political agenda. You can't get around it. So
even my local law newspaper that they publish for the lawyers, it's still all political news in there. It saturates everything now.
Yeah, you can't get away from the one from the ABA Journal, right? American Bar Association. For those of you outside the profession. So the headline is Florida lawyer is arrested after refusing to put mask back on at a city meeting. You can't even talk about that. And you know it's true, whether you're left-wing or right-wing. You know that's political. You can't talk about that. If you're supporting the guy saying, look, this guy's 65 years old. He took off his mask. Maybe he's making a point. Maybe he's not. I don't know. I wasn't there. But you're saying, hey, the guy's 65. What do you do? They put him in jail overnight. If you try to defend that guy, you're a right-wing maniac. On the other end, if you say that guy should have been jailed because he was, at this meeting, he knows the mask laws, he knew what he was doing, you're a left-wing maniac. Like, you can't choose a side on that. That is how politicized, and this isn't even actual criminal law. I mean, yeah, he went to jail. I guess it's technically criminal law. It's under the criminal justice head. That's what's crazy about this. It's under the criminal justice law at the American Bar Association Journal. Like, this isn't local ordinance in Gainesville, local law. This is criminal law. But if you even, I don't know. What do you do? So I guess let's just go to the first issue, right? Virginia votes to abolish the death penalty. How do you feel about that, Tiger?
My first thought is that the death penalty is heavily insinuated in the U.S. Constitution. In the Fifth Amendment, it says that you cannot deprive a person of life, liberty, or property. So the founders, right there, you can see they saw the death penalty was a thing, and these are the same guys who wrote the Eighth Amendment, which many of these legislators and justices will say, oh, that abolishes the death penalty because it's cruel and unusual punishment. But the same text says it's possible to deprive a person of life and use due process.
Well, let's grant that. Let's say the Founding Fathers, 100%, they knew there was going to be the death penalty, and they were fine with that. It's in the Constitution. Death penalty is constitutional just by reading the Constitution, right? But then you have opponents of the death penalty, and this is an NPR article, because I refuse to cite the other place we found this. Opponents of the death penalty cite 1, the high cost, 2, the possibility of executing the innocent, and 3, the disproportionate racial impact. We can't talk about 3 because it's inherently political. But let's talk about the cost. What do you think about cost being a factor in deciding what should be law and what should not be law?
Well, my first thought is that the prison system is probably more expensive than executions. I mean, if you're housing somebody for years and years, you're feeding him, you're maybe, depending on the jail system, some medical treatments and things. That's got to be more expensive than the needle or chair or bullet.
I think that might be incorrect. I think one of the cost arguments that these guys make is that the cost is in the appeals process. So,
okay.
Yeah, the appeals for somebody on death row are at such an extraordinary cost that it's actually cheaper to keep them in prison for life.
Well, and the reason why that is that they can keep appealing. I'm trying to think. There was some big legal news about the death penalty a couple months ago where, normally whenever a capital defender is saying, oh, this guy shouldn't be executed yet, they keep delaying the execution. And the way that they do that is by looking at all these rules of how, while he's awaiting the execution, oh, he needs his window blinds open, he needs to be fed this way, and things like that. And every time the jail guards screw up something, then the capital defenders come in and they're like, oh, you can't execute him because you didn't give him enough sunlight beforehand.
Violated his rights.
So a judge in one of the states, I gotta look this up for you, he put a stop to those kind of rules. He was just like, no more of this. We're not doing this. And we had the first execution in quite some time because of that decision.
Well, that may be. I mean, maybe people just get more litigious the closer they come to the end. But I can also tell you, guards are, they might be, meritorious lawsuits, saying that the guards are picking on. Like, I've had a lot of clients who were picked on by guards. I have clients who've been beaten by guards. I thankfully wasn't beaten by guards, but certainly had my rights violated more ways than one. And I imagine the guys on death row, those guards are probably like, yeah, screw these guys. Like, they've been convicted. They're going to die. Like, who cares whether they get more sunlight or...
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, I could see that being, a real issue. But as far as cost being, determinative about whether we should have the death penalty or not, yeah, I mean, does it create a more just society? Then what does it matter what it costs? Do executions actually prevent people from committing crime? Do they deter people from committing crimes? Do they actually serve a public need? Then, if so, then what does it matter? Like, how much do we spend? How do you talk about that without getting political? How much do we spend on things that people don't agree with in this country? So if it were a cost thing and we actually got rid of crime with the death penalty, then I don't think cost is really a valid concern. But the third one I think is the real argument. And that is the possibility of executing innocent people. And it's not just the possibility. That happens. And innocent people are convicted every single day in this country. Every day, innocent people are convicted. And a lot of the times they're convicted because they do it themselves. They take plea deals. Even though they're innocent, they take plea deals so that they can get out of jail or so that some other thing can... Now, that doesn't necessarily happen in a death row case, obviously. Nobody takes a plea deal to be executed. That would be ridiculous.
Right.
But I've seen enough trials just anecdotally to know that trials don't turn out the way they're supposed to all the time. Innocent people are absolutely convicted. And if innocent people can be convicted of, resisting arrest or, battery or theft or just name the crime, innocent people are convicted of all those things. Why would they not be convicted of murder too? You ever looked into the Innocence Project, Tiger?
Yeah, I knew of it. They pushed it a lot in my law school. I never got a chance to work with them, but I knew of it.
I've never worked with them either, but a lot of what they do is 100% legit.
Yeah.
There's a movie that came out recently, actually. Brian Banks, I think was the name of the movie. A true story. Football player in high school. And it's amazing how closely the movie follows what actually happened, because most movies never do that. But it shows, he was accused of rape by this girl at his school that he apparently made out with in a hall. Was going to fight it, but his lawyer told him right before going in to this thing, look, you're a black kid being accused of rape in a jury that's going to be mostly white people who are just going to see a black kid accused of rape. Like, you need to take the plea. You're probably going to get probation, whatever. Just start your life over. And so he did. Except the judge did not give him probation. The judge gave him like 8 years in prison. So, true story. Actually, the rape never occurred. They never even had sex. The girl had lied, told multiple stories to different people. Like, the guy spent 8 years in prison. The Innocence Project didn't even get a hold of the case until after he was out of prison, until after he had served the entire term. So, cases like that happen all the time. There's another case, this guy Uriah. I talked about that on the show last week. Served years in prison for a crime. He never even left his house. Was accused of a sexual assault of this girl. Never left his house. Like, absolutely did not happen. They had the wrong guy. Found the right guy years and years later. He was released from prison His son was like 13 by the time he was out. It was disgusting. But things like that happen, and if things like that can happen, then people can absolutely be convicted of murder and go to death row and be executed even though they're innocent. So that's where I am on the death penalty. I just don't trust the system.
Speaking of movies, another one that just came out, this was a lawyer who spoke to at my law school, and we had to read his book, Just Mercy, and I believe the movie is about the same thing. He was a lawyer who represented a man who was accused of, I believe it was murder, and it was just kind of the same thing, but it's a good story. I don't want to spend time on it, but for those listening, you want to watch a legal drama, look up Just Mercy.
I'm on it. There's Steven in the comments is saying, didn't AIU make a video about at least one crappy thing? That this is a family-friendly show now, by the way, so I'm trying to SU the profanity. At least one crappy thing that the Innocence Project did. I don't know. What is AIU? What is Aleppo?
I'm not familiar.
Yeah, I don't know. If you want to put in the comment what documentary that was, or what video that was, I'm all ears, man. So Virginia has voted to abolish the death penalty. So I don't know. I think that's a good having.
I mean, at least they put it up to a vote. You know?
Yeah, well, no comment. But yeah, apparently they voted and they got rid of it. And so now no innocent people will be executed. And you got to think, does the death penalty really deter anybody these days? Like, how many serial killers do we have? How many people are out there raping and murdering right now? Like, absolutely no fear of the death penalty.
Yeah.
Can it be said it deters?
The deterrence theory for punishment is something that I never bought into, because criminals, they're not thinking ahead, and not even like a lot of crimes are either crimes of opportunity or crimes of passion. They just happen in a second. They're not thinking about what's going to happen, or they might not have the opportunity to think of what happened. So I don't believe in the deterrence theory at all of punishment.
Yeah, there are other theories though. Retribution being one.
Yes.
And I'm absolutely in agreement with that.
Yes.
If somebody murders somebody, that person should be executed. If somebody molests a child, that person should be executed. 100%. But
yes,
the way the legal system is, how would you ever know if they actually did that? That's my problem with the death penalty. It's not the penalty itself, which, if it 100% happened, that is the guy, he is executed. I'm not going to cry about it. But given all of the bad ways trials go and all of the messed up things we see in the judicial system here in America, like, how do you know? How do you know they actually... I don't believe anything anymore. I can't believe anything that happens in a court of law in America. It's beyond belief now.
I'm not sure I would go that far. I do think there is some good fact-finding that can go on in courts, but...
Well, that might have been hyperbolic.
I think, I think the bigger problem that you have in the criminal justice system is the power of the prosecutor as opposed to the defense. I think that is where it's a huge imbalance, and a lot of people are often voting for laws that screw them in the system. Like, what I say is that anytime you see a victim's rights bill, that's taking away your rights when you get accused of a crime. Yeah. That's typically what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. They call it victim's rights bill, but really what it is it gives more power to the police and to the prosecutors, and it takes away rights from criminal defendants. Every time.
Yeah.
What else we got here? Oh, a connected story. Life without parole for felony murder. Pennsylvania case targets sentencing law. So, what that means, let's back up a couple steps. Felony murder is an ancient concept in criminal law, where if you are committing a felony and somebody dies, that's on you, right? So the way my dad explained this to me when I was a kid, you go into a bank, you rob the bank, somebody has a heart attack there in the bank because of what you're... Felony murder. You are on the hook for first-degree murder because of what you've done. You go into the bank, you rob the bank, somebody runs out of the bank and gets shot by the police, that's on you. You rob a bank, somebody runs out of the bank, gets hit by a car, that's on you. Anybody who dies in the commission of your felony, that is a felony murder, and you are on the hook for first-degree murder. So, apparently in Pennsylvania, they are targeting that, saying that it's an unjust rule, which is interesting because that's been a rule for centuries. Felony murder is a very, very old rule. What do you think about that, Tiger?
Are they looking to abolish the rule of felony murder, or are they looking to abolish the sentencing for it?
I feel like they're just trying to change the life without parole concept. The felony murder concept is if a death occurs during the commission of another felony, that is considered a form of murder that's attributed to anybody who participated in the felony, regardless of whether they had any criminal intent in regard to the death of the other person. Right, okay, that's a definition. People in Pennsylvania who are serving life sentences, by the way, disclaimer, neither Tiger nor I are attorneys in Pennsylvania, so this is obviously not legal advice. We're just commenting on legal news here. The only way...
Oh, I was going to say, in the article here, I see it says their case argues the punishment for felony murder in the state is cruel and unconstitutional under Pennsylvania law. So it looks like they're trying to get rid of the punishment, the sentencing.
Okay, yeah, all right. Well, it goes back to what you said earlier. It's in the Constitution, the death penalty. Constitutionally, It's 100% constitutional. Like, the felony murder rule far preceded the United States of America.
Certainly.
Yeah, just like having circuits or having a judicial branch. Like, these basic concepts of criminal law or of the legal system in general, they preceded the United States of America. They preceded the Constitution, and obviously, the Founding Fathers were okay with those things and intended for our legal system to be an extension of the Anglo system, which is why we call it Anglo-American law. So, yeah, that's an interesting thing, though, trying to abolish felony murder. I never thought I'd see that in my lifetime. Never even crossed my mind it could happen. I don't even know what to say about that.
It's one of those things I can understand how people, they'll be like, hey, what, somebody died, I have no intent for the person to die, I didn't try to kill him, I wasn't even near him, no causality. I can understand that. Even to me, it doesn't make too much sense, but I also understand legally why somebody would want the person committing the felony to be punished for that death. It's the but-for idea. It's like, hey, if he never committed that felony, this guy would have never died.
Right. Well, and to concede your point here, it used to be that a felony was something you died for. So, kidnapping, murder, rape, burglary, you do these things, you will be executed. So, felony murder, it's like, well, the sentence is death anyway. You might not have intended for this person to die, but you did burglarize his house. You knew somebody would be it's a dwelling place, right? You went after dark, right? You should have known somebody could die. You kidnapped this person, right? Well, you knew that was a felony. You knew, it was dangerous. Felony murder should apply, even if you didn't intend to murder. But all these centuries later, well, not even centuries. I mean, decades. It used to be this way in the United States. It used to be felony meant something. Now, everybody has a felony. Like, a felony means nothing. A felony is just, do we not like this a lot? Like,
in some states, carrying a gun is a felony.
Right. Or
it doesn't matter what you're doing, nothing with it. It's still a felony.
Yeah, just having it on you. Having a tablet of Xanax on you without a prescription is a felony. At least in Florida. I don't know about other places, but having a baggie with cocaine residue in it is a felony. Now you're telling me you have a baggie of cocaine residue and somebody dies, like that's on you? That's ridiculous. You're telling me, like, all right, well, I was selling a pound of marijuana to a guy and he died of a heart attack. Like, does felony murder rule apply there? That might be a ridiculous example, but at the same time, a lot of felonies are ridiculous as far as being felonies. They should be misdemeanors, and they're not. So a lot of felonies we have today, like, they're not kidnapping, burglary, robbery, murder. Like, felonies today could be anything. God knows. You could drive on a suspended license multiple times and be a felon. Anything could make you a felon these days. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe it is a good idea. I suppose I haven't put it in my pipe long enough to smoke it.
And that's why whenever I would see in the news, every now and then you'll see some state trying to remove, what do you call it, like punishment for felons. Like, when you commit a felony, you lose a lot of rights. And there's some states that try and bring those rights back. And I feel like that's fine considering how many non-violent felonies there are now. There's a lot of people, they drove from one state to another. They had some guns in their car. Cops found it. Oh, you're a felon now, even though those guns were perfectly legal in the other states. And, they can't vote now. They lose all these rights. And never hurt anybody.
Yeah, so there was one, right, about this guy who, sorry, I'm trying to, all right, Steven, I saw your comment. It's all good, man. We'll try to find it. We'll hunt it down. We'll talk about it next week. So, speaking of which, Tiger, there was a guy who flew in, he was flying somewhere, I want to say like New York or Massachusetts, wherever he was from, and he owned a firearm, and there was a snowstorm or something. Plane got diverted to New Jersey. So they land in New Jersey. He gets off the plane. He gets his things. They give him a hotel voucher. He stays at the hotel. He goes back to the airport the next day to book into his flight. Checks his baggage. Baggage has the same firearm that he picked up from the night before. He gets arrested because he's not allowed to have that firearm in Jersey. And it's like, well, you gave me the firearm when I got off the plane at your airport that I didn't ask to be in, by the way. You diverted me here, gave me my firearm, and now you're arresting me now that I'm trying to get back on the plane to get where I was supposed to be going in the first place. That's how crazy these laws are. Like, there's no, that should be, I would think, full faith and credit, like you're, following the gun laws of the other state, but it's not. Like, they're absolutely all over the place. So yeah, we'll have to find that video again. James Fields. James Fields. Tell them about James Fields. I don't feel like we can do that in this episode, but I'm going to have to do an episode just on James Fields. Just on the legal aspect of James Fields' case. I don't know, it seems kind of inseparable from politics, but
yeah,
we will have to do that. We will have to talk about James Fields, absolutely. Any tips for dealing or avoiding dealing with a malicious, politically motivated prosecutor? Yes.
My first thought is whenever you're in a situation like that, where you're being politically prosecuted, you want to bring up the politics to the judge. You want to bring up your constitutional rights to the judge. I feel like there's a lot of these conservative textualist lawyers who, when they find themselves with a client in that position, they're like, oh, the judge and the jury, they'll understand that he didn't violate the law, and I just need to talk about the law. No, you got to tell them that you got somebody who the prosecution is trying to turn into a political prisoner in the United States of America. You need to make that clear right up front.
Yeah, it also takes the wind out of the sails of the prosecutor when they start saying, well, look at this. We would never convict somebody on free speech, but look at this speech. I would say there's a difference in tips for dealing with maliciously politically motivated prosecutors. Difference between that advice toward lay people and attorneys. For that, what Tiger's saying, that's for attorneys. My advice for all y'all, not legal advice, because this is just a podcast. We are not your lawyers. But my advice would be, avoid them at all costs. Do not speak to a prosecutor, for the love of God. It's just as bad as talking to a cop, right? Get your lawyer to talk to the prosecutor. You have no business talking to a prosecutor ever in your life. If you are not a criminal defense attorney or you are not a police officer yourself, you have no business talking to a prosecutor. Don't do it. For attorneys, I suppose my tips would be just like Tiger saying. We've had a lot of cases. Tiger and I have worked on these together where, these well-meaning attorneys, we're not talking about attorneys that we've seen who have thrown their clients under the bus, because that happens. That happens sometimes. Those are the ones we hunt down those cases to help those guys. But some attorneys will throw them under the bus, say, I want nothing to do with this. I'm not losing my membership of the country club. And then some attorneys will halfway throw their client under the bus, doing what Tiger's saying, where, yes, okay, my client is a monster, but he's also an American citizen. My client does have this hateful political ideology, and everybody hates him, and he's a horrible person, but, he didn't break the law. So don't look at that. And then you have the people who will actually face it head on. And I've seen a hopeful amount of those attorneys who will say straight up to the prosecutor and the judge and the jury, this is political. You can't do this. He is being prosecuted because of his political opinions. Obviously, he did not commit this crime. Look at what the police have done. Those are the guys you want to go with. And then there are the actual, fighters that we have been working with for years, that know 100%, and we're all on the same chopping block as the activists, because we're not part of the N Club, I guess, having done this for so long. But those are my tips. And for
I
agree
the
with
audience, I think a lot of Americans do not know that selective prosecution and malicious prosecution are crimes in and of themselves, by themselves. So selective prosecution is where if you got one guy breaks the law and prosecutors go and prosecute, and then another guy breaks the same law in the same manner, and the prosecutors do not arrest him. That's illegal. That's selective prosecution.
100% unconstitutional. Yeah. But happens all the time. All the time. Jacob in the chat here responded to Freedom Falcon's question, saying his tip for avoiding malicious, politically motivated prosecutors is stay out of dissident politics. 100%. That is the real answer. Just stay out of it. Don't be political. Like we are. We are totally not political. 100% legal podcast. We have nothing to do with politics. But as I said in previous broadcasts, before I learned to love Big Brother, if you are in dissident politics, you have to know you are going to jail. You have to get that in your head. You have to know that, not fear it. but know it. You will go to jail. It's a cost, right? So if you don't want to go to jail, you don't want to be prosecuted by, political actors, just stay home. Did they remove double jeopardy laws? Negative? I'm not sure. I might have missed the reference to that in the chat. I'm sorry, New Ideas guy. Let's see. Only possible tip, this is from Mr. Lincoln. The only possible way to be prepared for malicious, politically motivated prosecution is backed up by securities in a Swiss bank. Yeah, I guess being rich is a good way to avoid prosecutions, but not always. So what else we got in here? As far as these news. Oh, Kyle Rittenhouse. You wanted to talk about Rittenhouse's, not the political case, but I guess his recent bond revocation. Is that what happened?
No, his bond was never revoked. Instead, they did a massive fundraising campaign, and they went and paid up the millions of dollars or whatever it was, and he got out on that. And what this news is about is Kyle Rittenhouse. He is staying in an undisclosed safe house, and the address of it was not disclosed to the courts. And this was his lawyers were upfront about it to the court. They said to the court that, hey, our client, he fears political prosecution while he's out, not prosecution, violence really,
right,
while he's out, and so we don't want to give his address out to the court. Somewhere's going to find it, leak it, whatever. And the prosecutors already knew this. That was already a done deal that this happened. But for whatever reason, they're bringing it up again I don't know why they're saying to the court that this is a bad thing. So that's the latest thing.
I mean, there's a legitimate reason for the prosecutor to want to know where a criminal defendant is. Right. Generally speaking, most cases, not even generally speaking, in most cases, you have to tell the court where you're going to be. Like, you got to tell your bondsman where you're going to be. They've got to know where to find you in case you skip court. Like, that's standard practice. But in a case like this,
in this case, it's one of the exceptional cases because
right.
I don't know if you know this, but back even when he was first in jail, when he was first arrested, there were activists on Twitter calling out, hey, does anybody know what jail cell Kyle Rittenhouse is in? To find him
I did not know that, but that 100% sounds right to me. But yeah, like you said, it's an exception. It's an exceptional case. Sometimes if there's a real danger, you can keep the address under seal or, the judge has discretion on something like that. So, all right, well, I guess if his bond was not revoked, then it's not really an issue for discussion. Never mind. I must have been misinformed about what was going on.
They paid the millions.
I gotcha. All right, well, Pravada, good to see you too, brother. Been a long time. Mr. Reeves, thank you very much. Good to see you, man. Is there a legal definition for a political prisoner? I don't know about the Oxford definition, but I reckon we'd say it's somebody who is being prosecuted because of their political ideology. What do you think, Tiger?
I think just they're a political prisoner. That's what you would call them.
Yeah. If you're being incarcerated because of your activism or your political beliefs, or you've been targeted by a political law, I'd say that would satisfy my definition. Yeah. Alien Productions, that is a negative. Jay Gould, like the what did he do? No. The short answer, no. I'm not familiar with his work on grammar and the laws and policy of the USA. If you got a link, man, I will check it out, though. Let's see. What other cases we got in there that we were going to talk about?
That is what I have up, save for the Vaughn case.
Yes. All right. So you tell me about. I've been deliberately keeping out of things like Rittenhouse and Vaughn, and so why don't you tell me what happened in the Vaughn case, or what the feds are saying happened anyway?
Yeah, exactly. So that's an important thing for the audience to know. Anytime you see a news article about an arrest, you are only getting the prosecution side of the story. You are not getting the defendant's side of the story. And so often, I mean, Augustus's case was a fine example of that. They can print the newspapers, they only print what the accusers are saying, what the prosecutions are saying. You're not going to hear anything or very little from the defense side. So that just anytime you see, oh, this guy was arrested for this, you're only getting the police side of the story, the prosecution side of the story.
And it's not because the guy is guilty. It's not because the feds are right about a single thing, or the police or prosecutor or whoever. It's not necessarily that they're on to something. They caught this guy. It's not because, they're afraid to tell their side. The defendant is afraid to tell his side of the story. It's a strategic move because once you show those cards, the feds, the prosecutor, the cops, whoever it is that is running your name through the media, through the mud in the media, they're just going to make up something else. They're going to be prepared to change their story, to change things around, to railroad you more. That's why you don't talk about the case. Y'all heard me talking about my cases last week, but you'll notice I only talked about the cases that have been dismissed. I would never talk about the case that is still live. Like I said, you don't have to take bets on how that's going to turn out in the end, but you still don't talk about it. Not because they have something or because there's any semblance of guilt, but because they changed their story. They changed their evidence. They changed their entire game plan based on what you say. So if a defense attorney goes out there to media, like in a case like Vaughn's, and he says, well, no, actually, hold on, this is what happened. They have it all wrong. This is what happened. Well, all you're doing is giving those people the opportunity to make a completely different case against you. So that's why they don't do it. So Tiger's absolutely right. So, all right, so what happened in this case? Or again, what did they say happened in this case?
So what they're saying is that Ricky Vaughn, not his real name, it's a Twitter handle, but it's the name we're all familiar with. He was on Twitter and he was creating these images saying, cast your vote by text. And he went through a lot of trouble to make these images look exactly like Hillary Clinton political campaign ads. Like right down to a little fine print disclaimer saying it was paid for by Hillary Clinton. And the idea here was to trick people into casting their vote by text so that they're not going to the voting machines to do so. This was during yes. And another important point was this was during the Trump-Clinton election campaign. This was not Trump-Biden. This was back 4 years ago.
At least it was over 4 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was 2016, yeah, so about going on 4.5 years ago.
Yeah. And the important thing about this is the law that the prosecutors are trying to convict under. And that is USC 18241, Conspiracy Against Rights. And in short, that reads, if two or more persons conspire to, these are the key words, injure, oppress, threaten, or intimidate any person in the United States to, well,
That changed their vote, something like that.
to deprive them of their rights or privileges secured by the constitutional laws of the United States. Sorry, it's a bit wordy. I'm
No,
trying
so
to.
if, let's say you were his lawyer and you pointed that out and you were like, all right, well, that's not what happened. There was no intimidation. At most you can say this was not even as a joke. Let's say, he was just trying to trick people into it. Like, that's not part of the statute, is it? So
No.
If you went out and said that as his defense lawyer, you know what the feds are going to do? They're going to come back and just charge him under a different law. Or they're going to do something to say, yeah, well, actually, we looked up this case and tricking people is the same thing as intimidating in this case from like 1894. So you're giving them ammunition when you are going to the press with what your defense strategy is.
Exactly. And I do want to make an important point, too, through the federal complaint here. Remember, this is the federal government. They can find things out. In no part of this complaint do they say anybody actually changed their vote because of this.
Interesting.
Now, at the bottom, you see them say, hey, some people texted this number, but they changed their vote. Now, the federal government, they can find out who those people are. And I guarantee you they looked up who those people were and tried to see whether or not they voted or anything. But that's not in the complaint. It just says, oh, we found a number of people texted this number.
Yeah, I mean, if you gave us the phone numbers, we could find out who it was. Just do a Google search. You can reverse search a phone number. So, yeah, the feds knew who was actually texting these numbers. Yeah, they could find out within half an hour where these people are.
It didn't change a single vote.
Right.
It did not make a single person stay home.
Well, that's the thing. Maybe they're alleging that these guys texted somebody, or they texted this number with their vote, and so they didn't go out and do the mail-in vote or go in person or whatever it was. So, again, though, that wouldn't fall under the statute, from what I'm understanding.
No, they have to show an injury, oppression, threats, intimidations, and it's an image. It's a cartoon image.
And playing devil's advocate, are we sure the injury is not taking away their right to vote? Like, what are we talking about? What is the actual language of it?
Conspire to injure. Any person in the U.S. in the free exercise or enjoyment of any right or privilege.
By intimidation?
It's injure or intimidate. And that is to, like... So the idea here, what I heard is that this law was created to prosecute the KKK. And so the idea here is that somebody is physically stopping somebody from exercising their rights or threatening to stop them from exercising their rights.
Well, we'll have to look more into that one there.
Yeah.
We are coming to the end of the hour here, so Archie Bunker is asking, would you suggest not taking the stand in court if you're being politically railroaded? I would not make any suggestions like that as a blanket statement, Archie.
Yeah, that's heavily factually dependent, and that's something you talk to with your lawyer.
With your lawyer, yeah. 'Cause in other words, it's very case by case. It depends on not just the facts even, but also you and, I guess how you speak in public, how relatable you are to a jury. There's a lot of factors that go into counseling your client about whether to testify at trial. So, without knowing the case, anybody who tells you never take the stand or always take the stand is giving you bad advice. Don't listen
because
to that
you're
person.
always going to have, if you don't take the stand, you're always going to have your lawyer speaking for you, and he can probably speak better.
That's true. That's true.
A lot of things to consider.
Yeah. However, your lawyer also can't tell the jury your side of the story. So it could go either way. You really just don't know until, it's your case. It's true about not talking about your case. Yeah, I wonder if I had that civil rights applies to A rights. Yeah, we'll have to talk about Second Amendment rights too at some point, but that won't be today because we are out of time. So, Tiger, thank you very much for joining me, man. We'll have to do this again.
Right, thanks for having me.
100%, man. And Scrunjo, are you ever going to continue your video series on fatherhood? They had some great insights. Thank you for that. I would like to. But right now, I'm doing absolutely nothing but law. Law practice, legal marketing, this legal, not political podcast. So if I do the fatherhood series again, if that ever comes back, I will be sure to let you know. In the meantime, everyone, thank you very much for joining our legal podcast. And we will check in with you next Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Good night, everybody.
Take a look at my life and realize there's nothing left. 'Cause I've been blasting and laughing so long that everyone thinks my mind is gone. But I never crossed a man that didn't deserve it. To be treated like a punk, that's unheard of. You better watch how you're talking and the way you're walking, 'cause this life alone will leave you lined in chalk. Been spending most of life living in the gangster's paradise. Been spending most of life situation that got me facing. I can't live a normal life, I was raised by the stripes. So I gotta be down with the hood team. It's television watching got me chasing. Death ain't nothing but a heartbeat away. I'm living life to a die. I'm here.